All right. We are now recording. Thanks, Bryce. As always, can rewatch this later for your favorite parts.
Yep.
For the stuff you missed. For the stuff that went quickly.
Build the blooper reel.
That's right. All right, cool. It's the top of the hour. Thank you all for joining us. This is our weekly tips and hacks with Skimmer. I'm Flavia. I'm with the Skimmer based out of Austin, Texas. And we've got Skimmer ambassador Bryce Sarine today, who is based out of Phoenix, Arizona. So today we're going to look at profit reports. Which was based on a viewer request from last week. So you too could have whatever it is you want to see featured in a weekly tips and hacks. So to make profit reports work, there's a couple things that are going to need to happen. But the awesome part about profit reports, if you've never seen them before, is you'll be able to look at profitability per customer. Frequently, maybe there's a big customer, but it's not quite clear whether or not you're making any money. Maybe it's in a very far away service location. It's possibly not worth the trip, or maybe it is. And based on profit reports, you can understand whether your business model is working for you. Skimmer enables flat rates per stop and the all-powerful question to charge or not to charge for chemicals. So you'll be able to see what's working for you and what's not in profit reports. But to make all of that work, first of all, you have to make sure you have your service rates set up. And again, there's 4 different ways to set them up based on your customer, based on the agreement. But the other thing that is relevant to setting up the profit reports is setting labor costs as well. So those are kind of the pre-steps that need to happen before you dive into profit reports. And you need to set your dosages if you want to evaluate the profitability of a plus chems model. So Bryce is going to move through all of these items, but this is what we're going to talk about today. And we'll eventually check out a few sample profit reports, and we can talk about how to analyze them, how to think about them, and what takeaways you might have. So Bryce, take it away, and I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Good introduction. So the report, the profit report, this is definitely my favorite. Absolutely. I like to have all this information uploaded, and then you're able to basically just look at your top performers, your bottom report performers, and really make those adjustments as needed. So just to kind of show you the quickest, easiest way to get it set up and working, they kind of, the folks over at Skimmer really make it easy for us. If you take a look at the top right-hand corner, when you're looking at the profit report, you see you can change your service rates. You can change your dosages right here. So let's start with service rates. This allows you to mass edit everyone's service rates. So you can look at each of the customers. You can even click on all, and it'll pull up your whole customer list. And then what you're able to do is set their rate. If it's per month with chemicals, plus chemicals, or even if it's per stop as well, based on the different ways that you guys will charge. Your labor cost, which is basically what you're expecting to pay your team members. If you pay hourly, typically you figure out roughly how long you're going to spend at this stop and figure it in. You can really play with this number right here, putting in like your average fuel cost, things like that as well, to really try to find that correct number for each stop. Then if we jump back to the profit report real quick here, and we click on dosages, this is also extremely important. All this information saved, and later when we're digging into some of the other reports, you'll see why this stuff is so important to me when it comes to forecasting and just knowing what you're going to need. But if we were to pick on one, we have the chlorine tablets, your UOM, or unit of measurement. So in this case, we go by the tablet. You put in your cost per tablet. This is what you are paying for your tablets. So this looks like it's based on what the Leslie's price over the summer is what this price looks like. And then your price per unit of measure. Yeah, I have $5 in here. That this might not necessarily be what you would charge your customer, but this is the number that you would want so this is what the customer is paying. You check if this can be included with the service. So if you are one of those people who does, you do including chemicals in your pricing, but that doesn't always mean every chemical. You probably include chlorine and acid in that instance, but you might not include something like cyanuric acid, something that you don't regularly have to put in the water. So in this situation, you might want to actually not include it. So you'd have this box unchecked. And if you added this to anyone's pool, they would have to pay that $15 per pound or whatever it is that you end up charging when you're adding that cyanuric acid to the pool. On the right-hand side are the values that people can enter. So you just kind of choose the same thing with those unit of measurements. That this would be 1 pound, or in this case, 9 pounds. So you just make sure you have all the correct values there. That's also a good way to limit what people use. So if we go to phosphates, you can see I shouldn't have numbers like this. You shouldn't be able to put 96 ounces of a phosphate remover into a body of water. You guys know that would just not be very effective, and it would just destroy your filters. So we could trim all this all the way back to whatever number you think is the biggest that it should be, based on the size of pools that you're servicing. Probably 24 ounces is probably the most you'd ever want to put in there.
And Bryce, these are the values that anybody servicing the pool will see when they open up the app, right? You're basically setting their field.
Exactly. And then you could add, this one you see it's just going by 4 ounce increments, just because that's what's easy to measure with this. But if you're doing something like your acid or something where you want to be very precise, you can obviously put in any numbers in here, even fractions. So just kind of helps make it a little bit easy for your guys when they're actually out in the field and putting the chemicals in. You want to make sure that measurement is accurate, because that's going to play a big part in your actual profitability. If Zach was able to make it today, he's got a nice lecture where he talks about liquid chlorine being overdosed, the difference between a 1/4 gallon and a 1/3 gallon. He did the math once and figuring out how short we were on liquid chlorine versus where we should be, and it was a few $100s, but it was over the course of a week. So you can imagine what that could be over the course of a year or several years. It could be quite a bit of money, especially with the prices going up and up as they are. Jump back over to the profit report. So one thing that I always like to say when it comes to these reports, it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? So the better information that you put in here, the better the information is that will come back out. So in this case, if you look at whatever date range you want, we should look at just a month probably at a time to really get the best feel for it. It shows all of this information, the service rate. This one says $120 per stop plus chemicals, and the labor cost is $15 per stop. So, this isn't a great example of realistic information probably, but we can still see how the report works. You can see every time that the pool is serviced, what it costs, what you're charging, and what the profit is. If we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see exactly how many chemicals you used, what they cost you, and what you sold them for. So you can see that we made a profit on the tablets in this example, profit on the liquid chlorine, and a profit on the pH down, probably muriatic acid, as well as you can see what I was talking about with the fractions here. So, we used 1.5 gallons of liquid chlorine in this example. And you can see what your total profit was for this one stop. On the flip side, of course, we like to scroll down. I always like to look at what I call my top 10 and my bottom 10, just to see what the differences are. So you can see with this person, we're doing $140 per month, but it looks like, we're going out there almost every day. So that rate's probably just not going to be very profitable. And you can see that on the service, we make $105, but then on chemicals, we lose our money. We had 77 tablets in this pool, and we are not doing a plus chems model. So in this case, this is all just loss. So we end up making $105 in labor on the service, but then giving them $187 in chemicals. So we end up losing $82. Flavia, do you want to pull up those examples that you had as well, or?
Sure. Yeah, so these are, of course, samples from a demo account, but similarly, you have situations where you're charging with or without chemicals, right? And if you're not charging for chemicals, that price will show as zero, and so that cost will flow through, and you'll see whether you're getting hit on the chemicals that are going into the pool. So the folks on the left, they're making a decent service profit, but they're ultimately losing money on chemicals. On the right, they're losing money in both dimensions. So very simple, and it breaks it out by that weekly service and by chemicals. So that's kind of the fundamentals of profit reports. Is there a layer deeper we want to go, Bryce?
No, I would just suggest, those of you that are using it, and definitely feel free to reach out so we can look at your core data. Now that we've got so many people on here, I don't feel the same way about showing my pages, that have personal customer addresses and phone numbers and stuff on them. But people who want to reach out to me one-on-one, I'm happy to go over your information with you and show you what I'm looking at when I'm looking at my bottom 10, my top 10, your averages. I pulled up my report that I can see now, and I have a few customers this last month where I made 89 cents, $1.58. And it's just not necessarily worth having that customer at that rate. It really puts it into focus. It's like, okay, this customer needs to pay more, or we need to stop going. It's not really worth it for us to continue that service. And then the same thing.
I'm just curious, Bryce, can you talk about a few situations where you had customers where you made significant adjustments based on the profit report?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I first really got into using the Skimmer profit report, honestly, it'd probably been out for 6 months before I even paid it any attention. Like a lot of us, it gets really easy to get caught up in the day to day. But I remember looking at it and just seeing, it's like, oh, I have these customers who make me, they make me $60 a month, but then I have a bunch who are under $10, or even, I'm paying to service their pools. So one example, I had a customer who I pulled it up, and I was using a ridiculous amount of chlorine in their pool, and I was including chemicals at that time. And it kind of made me realize, since it was one of my service technicians going out there, and he was putting in something like, eight tablets a week, which, for a 30,000 gallons of water is an insane amount of chlorine. But he was getting zeros when he came back every week. So it gave me that opportunity to go out there and really identify what the issue is, and increasing his run time, and changing up the chemicals using some enzymes and some pool RX type things, which is maybe a little too pool technical for what we're talking about today, but it ended up resulting in tremendous savings. And actually, I didn't have to change that person's rate at all. I just had to change how we were balancing the water, which
that's really interesting. So it serves as an escalation almost. If things are out of whack with your with perhaps unprofitable customers, it may be related to the chemicals, it may be related to the labor, and there may not be anything that you need to do to adjust the in terms of the relationship with the customer. You don't have to go back and renegotiate things. You're finding other ways to address the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course, there's been dozens of times where it's been, okay, we need to renegotiate this rate with the customer. That is probably the more likely solution, but it's not the only one. Yeah, it looks like we have a few questions coming in already, though.
Fantastic. We had a handful in the chat. How to add in the hourly labor cost.
So yes, and someone was asking where to add gas prices. So it's kind of, yeah, I guess that's what you already answered. So basically that's what I'm doing. I'm going to that labor cost where you might have seen where I had $15, or let me just pull it up again if that's all right.
Yeah.
So if we go to service rates, we could do it here, just to approach it from another angle, just to make things interesting. It's the wrong one. There we go. I'll go in from the customers tab here. So we'll go into this customer and we can hit edit on their service location. So we can say that this person I happen to know is, 10 miles outside of the next closest person. I can figure out what our gas cost is. And basically I can just say, okay, we need to add $3 a visit to this stop, to make up for the gas prices, the additional time that's spent driving. So it's not extremely precise, but it does work for me when, I've got about 450 customers, and that number doesn't change that frequently. It's just something that we adjust occasionally, and it's getting us, I'd like to get as close as I can, but without having to go in here and update it every week. Obviously that would be a lot of work. So just kind of doing some rounding there.
And in that same field, there's a minutes per stop, right? Estimate. And of course, when you or your teams are actually running service stops, the actual amount of time will be reflected at the end of the day, right? So when you're going back and reviewing routes, you can see whether or not this kind of estimate is accurate, right? And if it's longer, if it's shorter, based on that, if you're paying hourly, can reflect that in the labor cost as well, and that'll roll up and into the profit report and let you know whether or not this is still a profitable customer from a labor perspective.
Yeah, and I would say in general, the 15 minutes works great for me, but we do have some of those customers that have huge pools or multiple bodies of water, so we'll definitely adjust that minutes per stop. And then you will have to adjust your labor costs as well. It doesn't do that automatically based on the minutes per stop.
Right.
But that's definitely something to take into account there too. That's a great point.
So a comment from the audience, good way to look at fuel costs. You can take the total miles driven per month and divide that from the total fuel cost to determine cost per mile. We have a question unrelated to profit reports. So let's just hold for a few minutes to close out the topic on profit reports. If folks are super eager to discuss other stuff, we can definitely do that too. Are there any questions about how to get the profit reports set up? This is definitely an exercise in making sure kind of you have the foundations right, that you're setting your rates, you're setting your dosages appropriately, that you have the right box checked in dosages, right? Include or don't include with plans that include chemicals, and getting some estimates of labor in there. So you want to get these pieces together when you're adding customers and setting their rates appropriately, and then you'll have a very full view of your business over time. Question from the audience, a report on total time spent with each customer. I wouldn't call it a report per se, but every day that routes are completed, you'll see how much time was actually spent at each service location. And Bryce is pulling that up there.
On the demo account, it might be tough to find a week where we did the service here. So in this case, it just shows the amount of time that it was open. I'd say a lot of times you'll see these ones where it says 1 minute. That's your technician who opens up the app after they're done and they just fill out the checklist real quick. So just making sure they get in the habit of opening up the app when they arrive at the property, look at the checklist, look at the notes as they're going through everything, and you should get a more realistic number about how long it takes them to finish the stop. Or, this one, 27 hours. If they open it up too soon, they'll want to restart that clock underneath the info tab.
Any other questions about inputs into the profit report? Let's see. Bryce, have you ever taken any kind of insights from the profit report to understand what customers you want to find more or less of?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was first starting out, I like to, my base is up here in the Paradise Valley area where there's a lot of, I'd call like mansion type homes. And I remember wanting to pursue those homes more aggressively. And then after I was doing that for a while, I realized that, really they weren't worth more. We spent more time there. They weren't as profitable as what we could accomplish, a little further north where the homes are closer together. There's not as much walking time between the homes. And, basically the difference was you do one house in this area for a rate that's maybe double normal, where you could do 3 houses up here. And in the same time period, it's like, well, 3 houses makes more sense unless I'm able to convince that person to increase their rate. It's not as worthwhile.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's definitely the density argument there, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. If you're able to get in and out of a yard in 10 minutes versus, it takes 5 minutes to walk to their backyard, and it's a big difference.
Yeah. All right, other questions about the profit reports? All right, well, I guess we can close out on profit reports. We had another question here that I'll follow up with somebody individually about mass emails, but we are happy to take more questions.
If you're okay, I want to answer the last part of that question in the Q&A. Because it sounds like what they're asking really isn't so much about broadcast emails as much as one of the
service email. Yeah.
So that's super easy to set up. It's just under general. Oh no, it's under service emails here under settings, and basically just toggle this on and you're in business. That's the number one reason I think that most people like to go to Skimmer, and that's it right there. And then of course there are some other settings where you can choose, like I don't include the name of my technician in case we switch it off, but I prefer to let them know all the readings, dosages, the checklist, and the photos. So, yeah.
Nope, let's see, another question or two. Done. We are prioritizing Skimmer invoicing and payments is the number one priority this year. It is coming. I promise you that. You are very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right. Awesome. Well, I think we can close it out here. Bryce, folks, we are doing these every Wednesday. If you've registered once, you are automatically registered for all subsequent weekly tips and hacks. You'll get the reminder email in your inbox. You can use the same link to join us. So no need to re-register. You are automatically added and invited. We will send a recording of this as a follow-up, and we'll cut it to the good stuff. And we'll also send the slide deck if you're more of a slower visual person like I am. And we will see you right here next week for next week's topic. And awesome. We just got a suggestion from the audience, work order. Okay, work order calendar. Okay, we can do a little work on work orders. And I think that's also a feature request. So all of those addressed right here next week.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.